That morning, I unlocked my phone when the message alert chimed. My eyes were already tired, but I forced myself to read every word carefully, as if afraid I had misread. The message was from Amelia, my daughter-in-law. "You don't need to come, the party is only for important people." I read it again and again, each word stabbing into my chest like a cold needle. My fingers trembled, and the phone nearly slipped from my hand. In that instant, my heart pounded wildly, my breath caught, as if someone had slammed a door in my face and pushed me outside like I was nothing but an intruder. I couldn't believe my eyes. This was a message sent to me, the mother who had spent her whole life raising Hunter, my son, the very one whose birthday the party was for. And yet, with just one message, I had been erased from the circle of happiness, as if my presence were nothing but an inconvenience. I collapsed into the old wooden chair in the living room. That chair had followed me through the years, from the tiny house of our struggling days to now. Its back creaked, but even that sound was more bearable than the cracking noise echoing from deep within my heart. I asked myself, am I no longer important? For years, I was the most important person to Hunter, his only support after he lost his father so young. I was the one who mattered enough to sacrifice everything so he could have the life he has today. And yet, my daughter-in-law reduced it all to a single cruel sentence. Shame and pain swelled in my chest. My hands shook, my lips quivered, but no words came out. I wanted to scream, to call Amelia immediately and demand an explanation. But I held back. I was afraid if I opened my mouth, my voice would crack into sobs, and I refused to cry in front of my daughter-in-law. I forced myself to type a short reply, "I understand." Just 2 words, cold and lifeless. I sent it, then let the phone fall onto the table. Staring at the line of text on the screen, I felt as if I had just signed my own sentence of exile from the family's happiness. The house sank into silence. The wall clock ticked steadily, but each sound pierced my ears like a knife. I looked around, old photos hung on the wall, Hunter as a little boy in my arms, then on his graduation day, his eyes bright with joy. They all reminded me how I had lived, loved, and sacrificed. And yet now, I was the one not needed. I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. I had grown used to enduring, to hiding my pain inside. But this time, it suffocated me. Perhaps to Amelia, I was nothing more than a useless shadow. But I knew the truth was never as simple as her curt message. Suddenly, a spark lit inside me. Silence didn't mean surrender. I knew I had to be at that party. Not to fight for recognition, nor to prove my place. I would be there for another reason, for a truth that needed to be revealed. I straightened my back and steadied my breathing. My heart was still heavy, but in my mind, a plan was taking shape. I had been silent too long, letting Amelia believe this old mother had lost all her strength to resist. But no. I still had reason, evidence, and a pride no one could strip away. That night, I sat at my old desk. Under the yellow light, papers, contracts, numbers came alive again in my memory. Everything I needed was already there, waiting for the right moment to come to light. In front of me was a family photo from years ago, when Hunter was healthy and Amelia still pretended to be the gentle wife. I stared at my son's smile for a long time, then whispered to myself, "I will protect you." Outside the window, the night was thick, but inside me, a new determination blazed. I would show up at that party. Amelia might think she had erased me, but I was the one holding the final card. I drew in a deep breath, lifting my head. Tomorrow, I would begin preparing. And on Hunter's birthday, I would no longer be the cast-off, submissive mother, but a living witness, the one to expose the truth Amelia thought she had buried. Silence could be a weapon, and I had learned how to wield it. So that when I finally spoke, everyone would have to listen. The day of my son's birthday finally came. I put on a pale blue coat, simple, but neat. Standing before the mirror, I breathed deeply. The wrinkles on my face showed clearly under the light, but in my eyes I recognized something harder, steadier than before. I wasn't going there to beg for a place. I was going to claim the truth. The restaurant was in the heart of the city. As I approached with my handbag full of documents, the glass doors reflected a small, lonely figure against the line of luxury cars outside. Golden lights spilled from inside, laughter and chatter rising in waves. My heart raced, but I pushed the door open and stepped in. And then, every eye turned toward me. I clearly heard the murmurs, "She still came, I thought she wasn't invited." A few smiles vanished, replaced by looks of surprise and mild annoyance. Amelia emerged from the crowd, her red gown clinging to her figure, her curled hair cascading over her shoulders. Her smile gleamed brightly, confident as a queen. I caught the flicker of shock in her eyes when she saw me, but she quickly recovered her polished grace. "Oh, you're here, Mother. What a surprise." Her voice was syrupy, but each word dripped with mockery. "I thought you'd be busy, so it wasn't convenient for you to attend." I looked straight into her eyes and gave a faint smile. "Today is Hunter's birthday. How could I possibly be absent?" My tone was calm, though my heart pounded like a drum. Amelia led me to a chair at the end of the table, far from the center. I knew it was her way of burying me in the crowd, stripping me of any significance. But I didn't care. Where I sat didn't matter. What mattered was that I was there. I sat down quietly, observing. Around me were glamorous faces, voices full of laughter, as if loneliness had no place among them. Yet in the clinking of glasses, in the flood of lively toasts, my heart grew as heavy as stone. Amelia walked up to me, leaned in, and whispered, "Mother, just sit still. Don't do anything to embarrass yourself in front of the guests." Her voice was sweet and sugary, but underneath lay a haughty command. I only smiled and gave no reply. My silence made Amelia briefly unsettled. She didn't know that silence itself was the weapon I was wielding, the strategy one was waiting with. Yet inside me, a storm was raging. I could already see the crimson velvet curtain lowering, preparing for a new act to begin. And I, in my quiet composure, was the one holding the key to that curtain's fall. The party carried on with merriment, music and laughter weaving together, but I sat there like a still shadow in the whirlwind. Glasses clinked, people toasted and congratulated one another, while I silently observed every detail. Amelia glided from table to table, her fiery red dress like a flame, wine glass in hand. Every smile, every nod was calculated. Like an actress on stage, she knew exactly how to draw attention, to make the guests believe she was the center of it all. I tilted my head and caught a whisper. Amelia leaned close to her best friend, her voice low, but the words carried clearly into my ears. "Don't worry, it's almost done. The company will soon be mine." My chest tightened, but my face betrayed nothing. I simply set my glass of water down slowly, my eyes fixed on her. Each of Amelia's words pierced me like a sharp needle, confirming that she was no longer just a disrespectful daughter-in-law, she was someone plotting to seize everything. I turned my gaze to Hunter. My son sat at the head table, his thin face alight with a hopeful glow. He was listening to a friend's congratulations, cheeks flushed with emotion. My heart ached. The boy no, the man I had raised still didn't know his life was being gripped by betrayal at his very side. I knew Hunter wasn't yet strong enough to withstand the storm looming over him. It was I who had to shield him. I brushed my hand against my handbag. Inside, I had carefully carried a thick file. For days I had stayed up late, organizing every document, every photograph, every piece of evidence. That was the key to turning the tables, to pulling Hunter out of the trap. But the moment hadn't come yet. I knew if I acted too soon, everything would descend into useless chaos. I had to wait for that one instant when Amelia could no longer deny it, when every eye in the room would be on me. So I remained silent. I let Amelia perform her play. I let the guests cheer, the music swell, the toasts mask the cruel truth. I sat there like a shadow, but one that quietly pulled the strings. A guest sat beside me, smiling warmly. "Mrs. Riley, you look so calm today. Surely a party like this must make you happy." I nodded faintly, my lips curving in a thin smile. I said nothing more, because I knew if I spoke, the fury inside me might spill out. I had to stay silent, stay composed until the very last moment. My eyes met Amelia's again. She was standing with her group of friends, giggling and raising her glass in a cheerful toast. I could see the pride in her eyes, the pride of believing she had fooled me, that she had everything under control. But Amelia had no idea that here, in this candlelit hall, the rope was tightening around her little by little. I sipped my water again, the chill sliding down my throat, cooling the fire in my chest. I told myself, let her think she's the queen. When the curtain falls, the truth will crush her. I glanced toward the gift pile, where my grandson beamed with delight, his young eyes sparkling. That innocent smile steadied me. I wasn't fighting just for Hunter, but for this child too, so he wouldn't grow up in a family built on lies, so he wouldn't watch his mother destroy the legacy of his father and grandmother. The music soared, a waiter passing with a tray of crimson wine glasses. I noticed a few guests casting curious glances at me. They saw me sitting silent, perhaps thinking I was lonely, unnecessary. They didn't know I was waiting for the moment to turn silence into a strike. Hot blood surged within me. I no longer felt like a frail old mother. I felt like a warrior lying in wait. In my simple handbag, I carried the most powerful weapon of all, the truth. Amelia might strut with confidence under the lights and music, but I knew every step she took was leading her closer to the abyss she herself had dug. I only had to wait for the right moment to cast the truth into the light. And I was ready. The piano still played steadily, but to me, all sounds seemed to fade. Sitting in that luxurious banquet hall, I was suddenly pulled back into the years long past, the days when golden lights, white roses, and wine glasses had never existed in my life. I remembered the old garage in a small town, where it served as both a workshop and a makeshift home. By day I worked as a laborer in a mechanic shop. By night, I kept books for a small store to earn a little extra. I even took in laundry from neighbors, sometimes cleaned restaurants, anything to cover tuition and meals for my son. Hunter often sat beside me, watching intently as I typed on an old computer. I still remember the sparkle in his eyes when he said, "Mom, someday I'll work with you. You won't have to struggle anymore." I only smiled, ruffling his hair, hiding my calloused hands. Inside, I burned with one dream, to build a small company, a place where I could stand on my own, no longer squeezed for every cent of wages. I didn't want Hunter to inherit the uncertainty I had endured. Year after year, every penny I saved went into that dream. In the beginning, the company was just a tiny office with a few second-hand desks and chairs bought from a liquidation market. I was the director, the accountant, and the janitor all at once. Some nights I stayed until midnight, scrubbing the floors alone, tidying piles of papers. But I never felt weary because every brick that built that place was proof that I hadn't given up. I remember clearly the morning Hunter received his college diploma. I wore the old dress I had kept from my wedding day, standing among the rows of proud parents. When I saw my son take that diploma, head held high amid the applause, I cried. Not tears of hardship, but tears of pride. All the years of sacrifice had borne fruit. When Hunter became an adult, I decided to hand the company over to him. I still remember that evening I called him into the study, placed the ring of keys and the stack of documents on the desk. I said, "This is the greatest gift of my life. Use it to build your future." Hunter froze for a moment, then threw his arms around me. I trusted him completely. I believed I had fulfilled my mission. From then on, I could peacefully watch my son soar, while I stepped back, ready to enjoy a quiet old age. But now, sitting in this extravagant party, watching Amelia glow while clinging to her friend's arms, that pride was suffocated. It felt as though all the sweat, tears, sleepless nights, and years of struggle had been trampled underfoot. I had placed my entire life into an inheritance, only to see today my daughter-in-law trying to turn it into her own trophy. I let my eyes sweep across the banquet table, at the radiant faces laughing and chatting. They had no idea that once I had to run to the factory when my old car broke down on the road, that I had lived off instant noodles for a week just to save enough money to buy Hunter a new set of textbooks. Those sacrifices, no one saw, no one remembered except me. And I would not allow them to be buried in forgetfulness and betrayal. I drew in a quiet breath, my hands tightening on my lap. Memories of the past merged with the present, like two opposing fragments, one side the darkness of those years of hardship, the other the glittering false light of tonight's party. Between those two extremes, I realized one truth: everything I had today did not come from anyone else, it came from me. And I had the right to protect it. My eyes came to rest on Hunter. He still sat there, his smile faint but sincere. In his eyes, I saw again the image of the boy who once sat beside me in that old garage, promising he would never let his mother suffer. My heart ached, but at the same time, it filled with determination. I whispered inside, "Hunter, I am still here. I will not let anyone steal what you and I built together." Between the flow of memories and the present moment, I could not forget the darkest time of all, when Hunter fell ill. It was a blow from heaven itself, not only to my son but also to me. I remember vividly the day he collapsed right in the company office. That morning he had called to brag that he was about to sign a major contract. But by afternoon, I received a panicked call: "Mrs. Riley, Hunter has fainted." I rushed to the hospital, my heart ready to burst from my chest. Seeing my son lying there, his face pale, I felt as if the whole world crumbled before my eyes. The doctors said Hunter suffered from severe nervous exhaustion with cardiac complications. It wasn't an immediately fatal condition, but if he didn't rest and receive treatment, the consequences would be serious. Hearing that tore me apart. My son, my pride, the one carrying the family legacy, was now lying motionless, breathing weakly through tubes. The months that followed were a living nightmare. I kept vigil in the hospital, sometimes dozing off on a hard plastic chair. At times, I held his cold hand and whispered, "Hunter, you must be strong. You cannot leave me." My tears dripped onto the sheets, but he stayed still, sunken in exhaustion. At first, Amelia was unfailingly gentle. She cared for Hunter like a devoted wife. Anyone who saw it admired her. "Your daughter-in-law is wonderful, she never leaves his side." I even felt grateful, thinking heaven had blessed my son with such a wife. But as time dragged on, Amelia's patience wore thin. I began to hear her sighs, saw her frowns grow deeper. She came to the hospital less and less, citing work and company responsibilities. When she did appear, she spent more time on her phone than holding her husband's hand. More than once I caught her glancing at the clock, her face betraying annoyance, as if caring for her sick husband were a burden. During that period, the company had virtually no presence from Hunter. It was Amelia who began stepping into the leadership role. At first, I trusted her, thinking she was only temporarily helping to keep the company afloat. I reassured myself, at least she's carrying the load, so Hunter can focus on recovering. But gradually, I sensed something was wrong. Whenever I asked about contracts, Amelia would just smile faintly. "Don't worry, Mother, I can handle it." She no longer consulted me, nor did she discuss matters with Hunter. Bit by bit, every decision, every document passed through her hands. I once witnessed Amelia place a thick stack of papers in front of Hunter, speaking sweetly. "You just need to sign, I'll take care of everything else." Hunter was still weak, his hand trembling as he held the pen. He trusted his wife, not bothering to read carefully. My stomach twisted as I watched, but I didn't dare interfere. I was afraid of upsetting him, afraid of bruising his pride, a man used to being the provider now reduced to dependence. So I stayed silent. That silence, I now realize, was like an invisible knife. It allowed Amelia to slowly take over, step by step tightening her grip on the company, the child of my blood, sweat, and tears. One evening, after leaving the hospital, I sat down and wept. I cried not only out of pity for Hunter, but also because of the growing unease within me. I felt a shadow looming over us, yet I blinded myself, insisting my daughter-in-law only wanted the best for her husband. The days Hunter spent in the hospital stretched endlessly. I became familiar with every patch of white wall, every faint sound in the cold corridors. I grew used to holding my sleeping son, to watching Amelia walk in with a beautiful fruit basket, smiling kindly at the nurses only to leave sooner than I expected. At first, I thought Amelia was only tired from work. But small changes began to surface. She often took urgent work calls, stepping into the hallway, her voice low but her eyes strangely bright. Once, I caught her reflection in the glass door, lips curled into a smile I hadn't seen in months when she was with her sick husband. Her business trips also became more frequent. Sometimes she claimed she had to meet clients in another city, sometimes it was a weekend conference. I grew suspicious, but I didn't want to believe it. I told myself, maybe she really is busy. Maybe I'm too paranoid. But a mother's heart cannot be deceived. One day, when I dropped by the company, I noticed Amelia's unusual gaze toward a young salesman named Andrew. I remember vividly the time I caught them together in the hallway. Amelia tilted her head, her hair falling over half her face, her eyes sparkling as she looked at him. Andrew reached out gently, adjusting the necklace around her neck in a way far too intimate. I froze, my heart clenched as if crushed in a vice, but my footsteps quietly turned away. I didn't want to cause a scene without proof. At the same time, I began noticing irregular papers. Amelia grew increasingly confident signing on Hunter's behalf. Contracts, transactions, even bank loans bore Hunter's signature, though I knew well my son no longer had the strength to read, much less decide. I saw in the hospital cabinet a pile of messy papers, red seals, scribbled signatures. I shivered, realizing my daughter-in-law had crossed the line. I suspected this company was nothing but a fat prey. Amelia had managed to siphon funds, mortgage assets, borrow money from multiple sources. Everything was under Hunter's name, but in truth it was all in her hands and her young lover's. The moment the time was right, they would drain it all and vanish, leaving Hunter sick and me with nothing but empty hands. I remember one cold rainy afternoon, sitting in the empty hospital room, watching my son sleep in a daze. Outside the window, raindrops beat against the glass like reminders of harsh truth. I asked myself, how can someone change so quickly? She once promised to stand by Hunter, once called me mother with such affection. Was all of it a lie? Tears rolled down my cheeks, but I wiped them away quickly. Crying wouldn't save Hunter. Crying wouldn't protect the company. I knew I had to stay sharp. Inside me, a smoldering fury turned into resolve. If I stayed silent any longer, everything I had built over a lifetime would be wiped away. I wouldn't just lose the company, I would lose Hunter's trust when he woke up and found everything stolen. I started watching Amelia more closely. I wrote down the days she went on business trips, recorded the strange phone numbers that called often. One time, when she forgot to lock her laptop, I glimpsed an open email inbox, full of messages to Andrew, laced with implication. Almost done. Once the company's in our hands, we'll leave this place. I shuddered. Every word was like a knife carving into my flesh. But I didn't confront her yet. I knew haste would only ruin me. I chose to wait, like a cat stalking prey in the dark. I let Amelia continue believing she was winning, let her reveal her true nature and mistakes. Every night back in my small house, I sat alone, sifting through memories, digging through every paper, every number. I gathered clues like shards of broken glass. A plan began to take shape in my mind. The more I thought, the clearer it became. This was no longer the weariness of a wife, no petty ambition. This was a deliberate, cold, ruthless scheme. A scheme to erase every trace of me and Hunter, so Amelia and her lover could walk away unscathed. And I told myself, no. Not ever. They will pay. One quiet evening, after returning from the hospital, I sat in my small room and opened the old computer that had been with me for years. The screen lit up, casting a bluish glow across my wrinkled face. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling as I typed the password into the company account. At first, I only meant to check a few routine invoices. But as I scrolled through the numbers, my heart froze. Strange transactions kept appearing, large sums transferred without reason, luxury purchases under the company's name. I narrowed my eyes, scrolling line by line, feeling the blood stop flowing in my veins. Every transaction was authorized by Amelia. Hunter's shaky signature was on the papers, but I knew too well that was no conscious hand. Those were the trembling strokes of a man half-conscious, forced to sign. A chill ran down my spine. All my suspicions suddenly sprouted wings and became reality. Amelia hadn't just abandoned Hunter, hadn't just cheated, she had been draining the company step by step. I could see the puzzle pieces clicking together, the mysterious trips, the secret calls, the important documents Hunter signed in exhaustion. All were links in a merciless plan. I sat frozen for hours, staring at the screen. She had never even tried to hide it. She simply thought I was too foolish or too weak to act. I leaned back in the chair, my fists clenching. For years I had kept quiet, endured, believing that silence preserved peace. But now I saw the cruel truth, silence was no longer sacrifice, but poison, killing my family, killing the company Hunter and I had built with our blood. I stood and walked to the altar where my late husband's photo rested. In the frame, he smiled kindly, his eyes shining as though still watching over me. I whispered. "Do you see? They want to steal everything, erase all that our son and I built together. But I won't let it happen. I promise." That night, I didn't sleep. I pulled out paper and pen, wrote down every irregular number, printed bank statements. The whole room filled with documents, thick with the smell of ink and strong coffee. Each paper, each number was a piece of evidence to indict her. I carefully stacked them, clipped them neatly, and placed them into a thick file. When dawn broke outside the window, I sat looking at that file, my heart both trembling and burning. I knew this was only the beginning. But with just one lead, I already had the red thread that would unravel the whole truth. I thought of Hunter, still lying in the hospital, his face pale, his eyes closed. He had no idea his wife was bleeding the company dry. He had no idea his own son's future was being played as a pawn. The thought brought tears again, but this time I didn't allow myself to collapse. I wiped them quickly and clenched my fists. A voice inside me rang out, firm and sharp, "Enough, Riley. Your patience has gone on long enough. From this moment, you are no longer a silent shadow. You will strike back." In the pale morning light, I folded the file and placed it carefully in my handbag. I no longer felt like a tired old woman, but like a warrior who had just found her weapon. And for the first time in many months, I felt something Amelia could never understand: pride. Pride that I still had the strength to rise. Pride that I was ready to face her head on. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But I had already grasped the first clue, and that was the beginning of the day Amelia would have to pay. From the moment I discovered those strange transactions, I knew I could no longer sit still. I had endured too long, kept silent too often. Now, silence would only make Amelia think I had grown old, weak, with no strength left to resist. But this old woman still had her mind, still had her experience, and most importantly, still had the love for her son. I picked up the phone and searched for the number of Dalton, the lawyer who had stood by me in the early days of building the company. He had witnessed me, a widowed woman with nothing, turn an old garage into a business with standing. His warm, steady voice came across the line. "Riley? It's been a long time. What's going on?" I hesitated for a moment, then drew a deep breath and spoke slowly but firmly. "I need you to help me protect my life's work. My company is being stolen. There was no mocking laugh, no shock, just a brief silence before Dalton replied. "All right. Tell me everything." I met him the following afternoon, bringing along the thick file I had spent the night preparing. Dalton read every page carefully, his eyes growing darker as he went on. When he finally closed the folder, he looked straight at me. "You have enough evidence to open an investigation. But we'll need more. We must prove deception both in her personal life and in the misappropriation of assets." I nodded. The trembling inside me had already given way to resolve. Dalton introduced me to a private investigator, Mr. Harris, a man known for exposing countless frauds. I handed him a photo of Amelia and Andrew, told him about the mysterious business trips. Harris gave a thin smile. "Don't worry, Mrs. Riley. We'll see the truth behind those false smiles." The days that followed, I lived in two worlds. By day, I still visited Hunter in the hospital, holding his hand, reassuring him that everything would be all right. By night, I sat for hours in my room, waiting for Harris's reports, waiting for Dalton to analyze each piece of evidence. I was both terrified and exhilarated, as if after years of being submerged, I was finally breaking the surface to breathe deeply again. It didn't take long before the pieces came together. Photographs of Amelia and Andrew leaving a suburban hotel, hand in hand. Text messages full of ambiguous words and secret promises. Restaurant bills, plane tickets, everything proving their affair was no longer suspicion but fact. Alongside this, Harris uncovered fake contracts, fabricated loan documents designed to siphon money. Large sums had been transferred into accounts held by a shell company in which Andrew was a hidden shareholder. I held that evidence in my hands, my whole body trembling. Not from fear, but from a mixture of pain and fury. I thought of Hunter if he were fully conscious, if he learned that his wife had betrayed him like this, how crushed he would be. I bit my lip, clutching the papers tightly. No, I would not allow my son to be destroyed any further. One evening, as I organized all the documents, I realized I was preparing weapons for war. Each photo, each bank statement, each contract, I stacked them neatly into a thick file, like I was assembling a bomb. I knew that once it was exposed to the light, everything would explode. I asked myself, where should the truth be revealed? In court? In a closed meeting? No. When I received that message, I already knew, I would expose it at the very place Amelia believed she had triumphed my son's birthday party. In front of the guests, under the gaze of society, right on the stage where she crowned herself queen. I pictured it, Amelia radiant, confidently raising her glass, and me standing up, opening each page of evidence. No need to scream, no need to curse, the truth itself would be enough to strip everything bare. And I knew, that birthday would not just be a party, it would be a day of reckoning, when Amelia would have to face her own sins. Back to reality, the moment came sooner than I thought. The party was reaching its climax. The staff rolled out a huge birthday cake to the center of the room, candles flickering brightly. Guests clapped in delight, music swelled, and everyone turned toward the main table where Hunter and my grandson sat. Amelia stood beside them, her face glowing, her smile radiant as if the whole world revolved around her. In those proud eyes, I saw triumph, a queen certain that everything was firmly in her grasp. I drew a deep breath. My heart pounded, but my mind was clear, sharper than ever. I knew this was the moment I had been waiting for. If I let it pass, I would never get another chance. As everyone prepared to raise their glasses, I slowly stood up. The wooden chair scraped softly, but in that noisy room, the faint sound echoed like a drumbeat. I carried the file and walked toward the center of the grand hall. The room froze, dozens of curious eyes turning toward me. I placed my hand on the file in front of me. My voice rang out, steady and firm. Before Hunter blows out the candles, I have something to share. No one had time to react. I opened the file, lifted the first page high. Photographs of Amelia and Andrew leaving the hotel, hand in hand, glared under the golden lights. A wave of whispers rippled through the room. I turned the pages, printed text messages, filled with suggestive words and promises, when the company is ours, we'll run away together. Then came shady loan agreements, forged documents, money transfers that had vanished without a trace. Each page I revealed was like a knife, slashing through the mask Amelia had worn so carefully. The music stopped dead. The guests were stunned, some covered their mouths, others widened their eyes in disbelief. No one could fathom that in the middle of this glittering celebration, the brutal truth would be laid bare. Hunter sat frozen. His eyes reddened, his hand trembling as it clenched the edge of the table. I saw his shoulders shake, torn between anguish and disbelief that the woman he had called his wife could betray him so cruelly. Amelia's face turned ashen, her lips quivering. She stammered. "No, it's not like that. This is fabricated." But her voice was feeble, stripped of all authority. The entire room fell silent, the only sound the turning of my pages echoing through the hall. At that moment, the door opened. Dalton, the attorney, and Harris, the private investigator I had contacted earlier, walked in. They came straight to my side, their voices firm. "Everything Mrs. Riley has presented is absolutely correct. We have conducted independent verification. All the evidence is legitimate and carries full legal weight." I lifted my head and looked around. Shocked faces everywhere, eyes now turned on Amelia and Andrew. A few guests shook their heads, edging away from the table, distancing themselves from the disgraced couple. Amelia tried to stand firm, her eyes darting around as if searching for an escape. Andrew, the young lover, kept his head down, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. Gone was his usual confidence, in its place was the look of a coward unmasked before a crowd. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, calm, like a witness to an undeniable truth. The silence hung heavy for several suffocating seconds. Then a guest finally blurted out. "My God, so that's the truth." Murmurs spread, swelling like a tide washing away the glamorous facade. All the compliments, all the admiration once given to Amelia vanished, replaced by disgust and contempt. I turned to my son. Hunter lifted his head, his eyes brimming with tears, slowly turning toward me. In that look I read 1,000 unspeakable words, pain, regret, and gratitude. I gave him a small nod, a silent message, "I'm here. I won't let you fall." The room was utterly still, broken only by Amelia's ragged breathing. She suddenly screamed, her voice sharp and shrill. "You're humiliating me on purpose. This is a setup." I didn't answer. Dalton stepped forward, his tone cutting cold. "There is no setup. Everything has been submitted to the authorities. From this very moment, every scheme to seize the assets is null and void." When Dalton finished, the room plunged into silence again. The birthday candles on the cake still burned, but no one cared to cheer or sing. The party had turned into a public trial, with Amelia and Andrew dragged into the light. Amelia lunged toward the table, trying to snatch the file from my hands. But Dalton quickly blocked her path. She staggered back, panic in her eyes. She pointed at me, her voice trembling but furious. "You're jealous of me. You want to destroy our happiness." I met her gaze steadily and said, calm and clear. "Happiness cannot be built on betrayal and lies. What you call happiness is nothing more than greed and treachery." The entire party froze. The candles still flickered on the cake, but the atmosphere had changed completely. No more laughter, no more music, only the raw truth, striking like lightning across the room. I sat down, resting my hand on the open file. I knew from this moment on, there was no turning back for Amelia and Andrew. And from this moment, I had reclaimed the right to protect my son, to protect my family. Hunter sat stunned, his trembling hand covering his forehead. I saw tears dripping onto the table. My heart twisted, I longed to run and hold him, but I knew he needed to face this truth. Only by facing it could he rise again. Andrew, the young lover, still hung his head, unable to lift it. He inched toward the door, as if to slip away. But Harris, the investigator, stepped in and blocked his path, his voice calm yet chilling. "You're not going anywhere. The authorities will need to speak with you." Amelia screamed and thrashed, but every word she spat only deepened the crowd's contempt. Dalton laid another stack of documents on the table with a sharp thud. "Here is the proof of fraudulent contracts, illegal loans all carried out by you and Andrew. The company's assets have been frozen. From this moment forward, you no longer have the right to touch a single cent." Amelia was stunned into silence. Her flushed face turned ashen gray. Her hands trembled, stripped of all the pride she once wore. I saw in her eyes sheer terror, the gaze of someone stripped bare in front of everyone. The party dissolved into chaos. Whispers, scraping chairs, the sharp clatter of high heels echoed as guests hurried out. The birthday cake was abandoned, wax dripping down in long streaks over the frosting. The once lavish room had crumbled into the wreckage of shattered illusions. I stood still, feeling no triumph, no joy. Instead, a profound weariness settled over me. I found no satisfaction in Amelia's collapse, only relief that the truth had finally come to light. I turned to Hunter. He looked up, eyes red and swollen, and whispered, "Mom, how did you know everything?" I clasped my son's trembling hand, still warm, and spoke slowly. "I'm your mother. I couldn't let you lose everything." He squeezed my hand tight, then buried his head against my shoulder, sobbing like a child. My heart ached, but I felt a measure of comfort. At least Hunter understood now that I had never abandoned him. Amelia was spent, slumped in a chair, her hair disheveled, her eyes vacant. No trace remained of the radiant woman in the red dress. Only a defeated figure remained, humiliated under the scorn of all. Dalton approached me, bowing slightly. "Everything has been set in motion. You can rest assured, the company will not be lost." I nodded, feeling the weight on my shoulders ease after so many months of strain. Meanwhile, Andrew was escorted out. Amelia screamed after him, but no one paid her any mind. Her bitter cries echoed through the emptying hall, sounding like the wails of a soul that had lost everything. I closed my eyes briefly. After so much silence, so much endurance, the end had finally come. The flame of pride in my heart had never gone out. It had only waited for this day, to blaze forth and illuminate the truth. And today, in the very party where Amelia thought herself queen, the truth had toppled her false throne. Months have passed since that fateful birthday night. Enough time for the storm to settle, though the aftershocks remain etched in my mind. Whenever I recall it, I still shiver, not from regret, but from the feeling of having emerged from a long nightmare. Amelia and Andrew have been formally indicted. The first trial was swift. The evidence Dalton, and Harris presented crushed every attempt at denial. Amelia, who once screamed in protest, finally fell silent, her gaze weary and vacant. I sat in the courtroom, not looking at her as an enemy, but as a stranger, a woman who had burned everything to ash in her blind ambition. The company was protected, not a penny lost. Dalton helped me recover all the fraudulent transactions and freeze the assets that had been siphoned away. Hunter, after months of crisis, finally began to recover. Medication, treatment, and most importantly, the release of his spirit from the shadow of betrayal helped my son stand again. I remember the morning he returned to the office. Sunlight streamed through the glass, lighting up his face, gaunt, but radiant. He turned to me, smiling softly, the gentle smile of his childhood. "Mom, this time I won't let you worry anymore." I looked at my son in his neatly pressed suit, walking slowly but steadily. Beside him, I felt as if I had gone back years, to when I guided his very first steps. But this time, I no longer had to carry the world for him. I could simply stand quietly behind, a place of peace and support. The company gradually stabilized. Employees who had once been unsettled now felt reassured. They looked at me with respect, and at Hunter with trust. We began to rebuild from the fragments, just as I once did in that old garage at the very beginning. But perhaps what makes me happiest now is not the company, but my little home. These days, every afternoon I hear the sound of a child's laughter. My grandson often runs across the yard, holding a ball, calling, "Grandma, come play with me." I sit on the porch as the sunset spills down, the evening breeze cool and gentle. Watching the child laugh so innocently, my heart warms. He doesn't know about the storms that nearly swept this family away. And perhaps, I don't want him to know. Children deserve to grow up in peace, unburdened by hatred. Hunter often sits beside me, sometimes in silence. Once, he held my hand, his voice choked. "Mom, without you, I would have lost everything." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "Son, silence doesn't mean weakness." I waited for the right moment to speak. And because of that, we still have each other. These days, I live more slowly. I no longer lie awake in fear, no longer haunted by the terror of betrayal. I wake early, brew a cup of tea, and listen to the birds outside the garden. In the afternoons, I water my small flower pots, then sit with a book as the sun fades. A simple life, but my heart is light. Sometimes, I think of Amelia. I no longer feel the anger I once did. Anger only imprisoned me in the past. Now, I feel more pity. A woman who once had a family, who once had the chance at a peaceful life, chose the path of betrayal. And in the end, she lost everything. That was the price of greed. As for me, I found liberation. Not just freedom from Amelia's schemes, but from the fear that had bound me for so long. I learned to rise, to believe in my own strength, even when old age seemed to have taken everything from me. One evening, I sat down to write in my journal. My handwriting trembled, but the words were clear. Sometimes, silence is patience. But sometimes, silence is a weapon. As long as you know when to speak, you can win back justice for yourself. The lesson from this story is this: sometimes silence is not surrender, but a step back to observe, to prepare the right strike. Trust and love, if exploited, can become a double-edged sword. But once we dare to raise our voice for what is right, truth has the power to bring down every falsehood. A woman even in old age, even when thought to be weak, can become the shield that protects her family and her legacy, as long as she holds on to her pride and courage until the very end.